Okay, so the Lucas didn't want to be my best friend, so instead I think it made things worse, because now my transmission doesn't do anything. It's either in neutral or in park. So I put in drive, won't go anywhere. Put in reverse, won't go anywhere. So the only gear that does what it's supposed to is park, which doesn't help me out that much since this thing is my daily driver. So I looked up a pump on the internet. Google has a pump, but I don't have an account in order to order one. I looked on Amazon. I do have an account for them, but they don't have one. I tried AutoZone. They didn't have one. Advanced Auto. They didn't have one. O'Reilly's. They didn't have one either. And I tried Pep Boys, and guess what? They didn't have one. So if Pep Boys doesn't have it, I'm pretty sure nobody else has it, except for maybe Summit. And I'm sure these transmissions are not that popular, so I'm sure Summit's going to have to special order it, which I don't feel like doing. Why waste my time, going through all this hassle for a transmission that I'm not going to keep that much longer anyway? I'm sure there's a private business out there somewhere that specializes in transmissions like this, and they might have the part I need, but forget that. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not bullshitting with this transmission. So in my previous video, I showed you guys how to replace your transmission rear seal because my fluid kept pissing out, or transfer case seal, whatever the hell you want to call it. But that doesn't matter anymore. So the video after this one will be about my LS swap, and because I was not planning on doing an LS swap anytime soon. But in my case, it looks like I have no choice. So since my LS engine is nowhere near ready, and I don't even have a transmission or a transfer case or a drive shaft or a new rear axle in order to do this entire swap correctly, I'm going to have to jump on it. So what I need to do, left on the LS, I've done the torque bolts. I'll show you guys that here in a different video. I got the head gaskets. I put all the heads back on, and I got all the pulleys back on. The only thing I need left is I already got the throttle cable. I got the throttle body. I put the intake on, and I put new gaskets on. And the next thing is the wiring harness, get the computer flash, the transmission, and the drive shaft and the axle. We just gone over that. So if you look under the hood here, so under here you have the gorgeous 5.9 liter V8 360. Behind that's a Turbo 400. She's a beaut. Nah, man. You call this a beaut? This is what I call a beaut. She's definitely a beaut. Take a good long look, you guys, because this video is the last one for the 5.9. Yep, sad to see her go, but I'm really excited for the LS. I think I'll be much happier with it, and it won't give me any trouble any longer. Once I put the LS engine in here, this thing will get double the horsepower, double the fuel economy, and more electronics will be involved, but that's the exciting part. Technically, the only hard part I can think of is the modifications, such as the motor mounts and the transmission cross member, and getting this thing to sit and fit properly, like directly in the center, or like front or back, like however I need to get it to fit. But other than that, it should be pretty much plug and play. So when I pull this engine out, I'm going to go ahead and take the exhaust manifolds with it, obviously. But when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut the pipe down there and leave the back half of my exhaust where all my mufflers and my exhaust tips are at. I figure I'm going to leave that alone because I can't afford a new exhaust right now, and plus this exhaust works good for now. As far as the brake booster goes, that should bolt right up. I'm going to keep this hose, but I'm going to find an inlet on the LS in order to put the vacuum hose on in order for it to work. I've decided to leave everything on the firewall alone. Leave it all original because I figure that'll be easier and it won't be too much harder to mock it up. As well as the original chassis wiring, I'm leaving that as well. So it is possible to make the LS standalone, which is what I'm going to make mine do. The only thing I have to hook up is the ECU. You gotta find power, which you can run to your battery or your ignition switch. We'll figure that out. All you need to get the ECU working is power and ground. Ground, you can just ground it anywhere on the body. I recommend you hook it up to the ignition solenoid. And last but not least, don't forget the ground strap. It's right here, bolted to the motor mount, and you have the other half bolted to the engine block. And you're going to need that when you do the LS swap. Now, you're going to need a ground strap when you do the LS swap, but all engines that run off of ignition need a ground strap. Now here's the rear axle. As you can tell, the differential is off to the right, which the transfer case drive shaft is off to the right. So that's how Chrysler designed their back axles for the Wagoneers, pushing the differential off to the right because the gas tank was originally at the left there, underneath the driver door and the rear driver door. But since I'm getting a 4L60E electronic shift transmission, the drive shaft is going to be in the middle, therefore the axle has to be in the middle. And I don't have that original 14-gallon Wagoneer gas tank anymore. My gas tank is now a 21-gallon Cherokee tank, which I think is way more convenient. And what's a Jeep without a lift, right? So here are my leaf springs. You can tell they're really worn, sagging down, because it's supposed to have somewhat of a rainbow incline to it. And this is perfectly flat, which isn't always good. You know what that means? It's time for these to go as well. And about a year ago, when I first got this car, I put a lift on, and the shackle used to be up here, but I decided to move it down here, which gave me about a 6-inch lift. Doesn't like a 6-inch lift because my leaf springs are really worn out. Now I'm going to get a new one of those when I get the brand new axle. Hopefully the leaf springs that are on the axle I'm getting will match up to these bolt patterns. But I'm not sure how long this is. I'll have to find the length. Alright, it's kind of a tight squeeze under here. But here you have the other side of the leaf spring. And this side is towards the front of the vehicle. So when I do the lift, you notice there's 2 holes. And in my opinion, when it comes to Jeeps, always go higher. Always upgrade. Never downsize. So I'm going to go ahead and use this bolt. And that looks like it's about, they'll add about 3.5 to 4 inches. And when I get the more stiffer leaf spring, that'll raise it up a ton. Which I like. Because I like to put 37s on this thing eventually. But I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. But anyway. So when you use this hole. Let's see if I can get in here. There's no hole on the other side, so you're going to have to drill it yourself. I think this hole is slightly narrower, so you're going to have to drill it wider in order to get this bolt in there. And that will give you the lift you want. You don't want to do higher blocks because, you know, it'll increase the chance of the blocks rolling over on you. And you could do a shackle. Over time, the bigger shackle you get, it will bring your wheel forward. And I'm already having that issue. See right here, I got about 1.5 inch clearance. And it's rubbing right here a bit. It's so bad that the metal's starting to bend outwards due to the tie rubbing against it. And back here, you have a wide-ass gap. So, I decided to do a Wrangler version. So here, the incline is steeper, but here, it's more slanted. But eventually, I might cut this out and make the slope even with this. But right now, I'm trying to make up for the spacing on each side. The front axle is the least of my worries right now, but we'll go over it a little bit. So, right here you have a Dana 44. You know, you have your typical stock, you know, drag link and tie rod. You know, my ball joints are worn out as it is. You know, things are, you know, falling loose, coming apart. My steering stabilizer's leaking, so it's time for this thing to go as well. These leaf springs are in a little bit better shape. But I'm not keeping leaf springs. I'm going 4-link. Yeah, I think a 4-link will look good under here. I just like all the linkage. You know, people have a hard time with them. They say like it causes death wobble and it gives you bump steer, which it does. But if you adjust it right and do the right engineering, you won't have any of those problems. First off, you have the 4-link rods themselves, and those go behind the axle and well to the frame there. Moving on to the coil springs. When you get the coil springs, the axle I'm getting, hopefully it'll already have the coil buckets on the axle. in order to have a spot for my spring to sit. And I got to make sure it's at the right height and the right pitch, and make sure it sits flat. And up here you have the sway bar, not much changes on that. Here you have, I think it's called the drag link. I get the drag link and tie rod mixed up. So here you have the drag link. Not a whole lot changes on that, except for when you put your track bar on. I'll get to that in a minute. And here you have your tie rod. Not a whole lot changes on the tie rod either, except when you go to do your alignment. And since I'm getting rid of my ball joints and I'm getting Heim joints, there will be a lot more thread adjustment involved. So when you adjust your tie rod, you definitely don't want any positive or negative caster. What I mean by that is when both your wheels are facing in or are facing out that way, and that will cause uneven wear, and it will also cause death wobble. So earlier I mentioned your drag link and your track bar have to do with each other. Well, they kind of do. So here you have the incline of your drag link, and pretend there's a invisible track bar here. So when you put your track bar on, you have to make sure it's at the same slope as your drag link. Otherwise, you get what's called bump steer, and that's when you go over a bump, the axle puts stress on the track bar, and due to the uneven inclines of both of these, when you go over a bump, the axle will push up and it'll pull on the tie rod, and therefore it'll pull on your steering box, giving you bump steers when your wheel turns back and forth every time you go over a bump. So make sure those are properly measured. Track bar is fairly easy to install. It's making sure your welds are good enough. So you're going to want to make a bracket like around here or something. I'm sorry, not here, like, I don't know, further over here or something. You want to make sure there's lots of distance involved. You want a big enough track bar in order to have enough trust in your track bar. So you weld one part to the axle and you weld the other part to the frame up here. And last but not least, there's a stabilizer. This also helps with death wobble. When it's, when the juice inside here is still good, it helps. And but mine's obviously worn out, so it's not really doing its job anymore. So I thought about either getting a dual stabilizer or having the one, but getting a beefier one that can withstand, or keep just the one, but get a beefier one that can withstand more road abuse. And just like that, you have a 4-link. Okay guys, that's it for today. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share this video, and stay tuned for the next video.